Hello and welcome to the first installment of Ask the Expert. My name's Grace Kirkley and I'm a marketing analyst here at DQ. This month I'm joined by Mark Lasser, Senior Accessibility Consultant at DQ. Mark, thanks so much for joining.
My pleasure.
Awesome. So before we get into some accessibility specific questions, I wanted to ask you more about your background and how you got into the accessibility field in the first place.
Yeah, sure, Grace. I actually became blind as an adult about 5 or 6 years ago. It happened very suddenly with a very rare optic nerve condition. And at the time, I was teaching accounting at the University of Colorado in Denver and thinking about doing a career as a CPA, but decided to change my mind when I realized how difficult it is both learning and teaching assistive technologies. And so instead, I went into the accessibility fields after I rehabbed myself and went through the process firsthand. Really had a new perspective on how difficult these things are, especially when they're designed without accessibility in mind. And so I looked for work in accessibility and initially took a position with Charter Communications, a big cable company, um, and then decided to take a different path through Starbucks Corporation Accessibility in Seattle, and decided that 300 days of rain a year wasn't really my speed, and was offered a position with DQ that allowed me to relocate to not quite so rainy weather, and here I am.
Yeah, you traded that rain for a lot of snow.
A little. It's honestly, it's not as bad. People in Michigan complain about the snow. I think one season of Seattle weather, they come running back to Michigan.
Probably true. We do like to complain. So, Mark, you've been a great resource to the marketing team on many occasions, always there to help us double check some of our work and make sure that it's as accessible as possible. And you're also a writer yourself. So, what's a tip that content writers and contributors should keep in mind?
I think the big ones are, if you're trying to explain something, keep it simple. Don't try to impress people with fancy vocabulary. I mean, I know how to do that. I went to Duke as an undergrad, and I have my share of big words. But I think generally speaking, keep things real, write the way you talk, and don't try to overly impress everybody by how smart you are. The objective of what you're writing is to get the other person to understand what it is you're saying, and that's the most important thing.
Absolutely. So, part of your role as a senior accessibility consultant is helping perform audits on websites and mobile apps. What's an issue that you see come up really often in that work, and how would you solve for it?
Well, there's a lot, of course, and it just depends, of course. But the ones we see probably most often are missing alternative text, which is the descriptions behind a picture, where it's really imperative that we know what the image is. And if it just says, 3985.jpg, that's not very helpful. The other one we see a lot of are links that don't have discernible descriptions or text that we can know what it is. One way that a screen reader navigates the screen is to look at a list of links. And if every link on the page says click here, that's not very helpful. We just get this list that says click here, click here, click here, click here. Instead, when those links describe what they are, whether it's, different colors and sizes and styles of t-shirts or jackets on a clothing store, or a description of a type of cable connector that we're looking for on Amazon to connect a hard drive to a laptop, which I just had to order. Those things need descriptions for the links that make a lot of sense. And when they do, that's massively helpful. And then if there's one more thing, it would be things like landmarks and headings, things that allow a user to know what's going on. When a sighted person looks at a web page, they don't read every word on the web page. You scan it. We're natural scanners. And a screen reader really is no different. We don't want to read every word on the web page to find what we're looking for. When there's good use of headings and good use of landmarks, we can pop around the page to the area that is what we're actually looking for, and then get more granular and read it in more detail. So those are the probably three of the biggest things.
Awesome. Those are some great things to look out for. It can be difficult to get your higher ups to start to care about accessibility in the first place, and then further on to grow and scale your accessibility program. What's a way in your mind to get that accessibility buy-in from your boss or your higher ups?
Well, the easiest way is with violence. I'm very much kidding. No, don't do that. But the way to do it is really through, various ways of developing empathy. It's very common to run into executives that have sympathy for people with disabilities, but they may not have empathy for disabilities. And so what we really need to do is to help them build the bridge over so that they can actually understand that the person who is, whether it's their customer or their employee who's trying to get something to be accessible, um, wants to do it, can do it. They just need a little bit of an accommodation as to how it gets done. And it might not be a person with a permanent disability. It could be people with temporary disabilities. When I lived in Colorado, the handicap spots or the disability parking spots were not very full in the summertime. Come wintertime, when everybody's up on the slopes every weekend, all of a sudden those spaces became in very, very high demand, and usually we're at overcapacity because of the number of people that would break a leg during skiing, just based on the volume of people that ski in Colorado. So the empathy is a big piece of that, and there's a lot of ways of doing it. It can be empathy labs. It can just be some very good conversations. It can be bringing in speakers that help them, and um, I think that you know understanding the size of the disability market also is a big factor. People are often completely floored when they find out that people with disabilities is a larger group than the millennials. It's a larger group than African Americans. It's a larger group than Latin Americans. And most every company, they're so focused on gaining market share that when you start to point out that this is a piece of market that they're currently ignoring and the size of it, that'll help gain their attention. So the latter is not so much an empathy play, but I think the two combined work pretty well.
Absolutely. We often hear that people are intimidated by the manual testing aspect of accessibility testing, but manual testing, as we know, is necessary to find issues that automation just can't catch.
Yeah.
What's your advice to someone who's just starting out and wanting to dip their toes into the manual testing side of things?
Well, first, I wouldn't try to tell them it's not intimidating. I think to some degree that's true, it is. But, in the rest of our life, how many things that we have done in our lives are intimidating at first and then we get over it? I mean, it could be something as extreme as skydiving. It could be something as little sort of drama as beginning an undergraduate school program. Um, but like everything, I mean, we face all the things that intimidate us by just taking one step at a time and setting good expectations. One is not going to be proficient in a screen reader the first day they use it, or a color contrast tool. You take one step at a time. You spend a little bit of time every day working on it. And when I say a little bit of time, I mean like 10 or 15 minutes at first. Like, you don't need to dedicate like 8 hours of your day to learning some of those manual testing tools. You'll get there. Just work on it a little bit at a time, and you'll figure a lot of it out.
That's a great point. Just taking it off in little consumable chunks certainly makes the bigger picture much easier to consume.
Absolutely.
What's an accessibility tip that somebody could implement right after they finish listening to this conversation?
Well, there's two that I come to think about. One is if you use any of the Microsoft products like Word, PowerPoint, or Excel, they have an accessibility checker. They're typically found in the review ribbon. And if you go to that ribbon, it's usually the same ribbon that includes your spell checker. Couple of things just after the spell checker is an accessibility checker. And it's one click of a button on your document, your Word document, or your PowerPoint, or your Excel workbook, and it will flag accessibility problems that might exist there. And in general, it will also tell you how to fix them. So that's just one click and a good habit to get into. Just like you always spell check, try to always accessibility check, and you'll learn a lot when you do that. That's one good way of doing it. Another thing you could do right away if you use social media is that Facebook actually allows you to pretty easily add alternative text to your images. So if you post some funny picture or a meme and you want other people who are blind and low vision to be able to know what it is, you can click on the picture, and then there's in the more options, there's this thing that says add alternative text, and you can replace it. Facebook tries to use artificial intelligence to kind of figure out what it is, but it's not usually very accurate. So you can replace that alternative text with your actual, not artificial intelligence, but real intelligence. And that's another really easy thing that you can do right away. Of course, the other thing you can do is install the Axe extension and check your websites using the Axe extension, but that's probably another session for you and me to talk about later.
Sounds good. Yeah, the accessibility checkers are really handy. I love using them when I'm working in Word and PowerPoint, especially if I'm fixing slides for a webinar that we're doing. It's just an easy way to get into the habit of checking for accessibility, just as you would check for grammar and punctuation. It's just as important.
Grace, what are the things that you most commonly find when you do the accessibility checker for PowerPoint? Is there one thing that it tends to flag most often?
Yeah, that's a good question. Definitely duplicate titles on slides. So something that I've built into my process for creating slide decks is making each of the titles, accurate descriptions. I'm not having the same title for every slide that's describing different information. Alt text for any images, and checking the reading order. That's an interesting one and pretty cool. The way that PowerPoint can display that is in what order different elements on your slide will, I believe, to replay back through a screen reader.
That's
So
right.
making sure your title and then your body content and then any images or text boxes that come up after that.
That's right. The way that you visually see the order on a PowerPoint slide is not necessarily the order in which it will read. It will read in the order that it was created. So if you edit things in the middle, visually it looks like it's in the middle, but in PowerPoint with a screen reader, it may think that that's something coming in later.
Awesome. All right, Mark, thank you so much for your insights here and taking the time to answer some questions. I really enjoyed our conversation.
My pleasure.
Any questions for Mark in a future Ask the Expert segment, we'd love to hear them. So please email me at grace.kirkley@deque.com and we'll get to them next time. Thanks, and we hope you enjoyed.